Couple in Arkansas were busted for apparently traveling hundreds of miles to allegedly meet an underage girl for sex. But guess what? It was a sting operation. And now they're both facing felony charges. We're talking with retired FBI agent Colin Schmitt. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, we do want to warn you, this story is disturbing, and it has some really sickening details. An Arkansas minor league football coach and his wife are accused of driving 200 miles to allegedly meet up with an underage girl for sex. Turns out the person the couple was chatting with online was an undercover cop. 26-year-old Benjamin Coney and 25-year-old Emily Grace Brinley are now charged with internet stalking of a minor and conspiracy to commit rape. We bring in retired FBI agent and the president of Kronos Investigations, Colin Schmitt. He's back with us here on Sidebar. Colin, good to see you. I want to go through the timeline of this, and we'll break it down each step. So, according to the probable cause affidavit, the detective, who was apparently posing as a young girl, got this direct message at the end of November from an account believed to be shared by Coney and Brinley. And after about a week, the conversation moved to an encrypted app, and the messages became so vulgar that I'm not even going to share them. But generally, do we see this kind of sting operation using this kind of technology?
All the time. It used to be something that only many years ago the FBI and Customs would do. Now, all law enforcement agencies have the ability to do this because of the way the internet is set up. And the FBI, for example, does give specific training to law enforcement on how to do undercover operations or online undercover operations. So it sounds like these law enforcement officers down there did a fantastic job, and good on them on getting a predator off the streets.
I'm always surprised that you have these predators who use this kind of technology. Don't they know they're going to get caught?
I think they're so overwhelmed by their own desires and their own need to fill whatever void is in their lives. And it also shows another aspect of this is we have a lot of great coaches. My kids play soccer. They're all fantastic. But also remember that people are going to be attracted to areas where they can get access to victims. So the fact that he was a coach and at some point he had access to children really is concerning. And I'm sure those law enforcement officers down there are expanding their investigation to make sure he hasn't harmed anybody.
Hey, everybody, this is a Morgan & Morgan legal alert. Evidence shows that Google has allegedly violated the privacy of millions of Americans via incognito mode. Your personal information and data may have been unfairly collected and then used for profit. As America's largest injury law firm, Morgan & Morgan has recovered over $20 billion in compensation for clients, and they may be able to help you fight for justice. If you've used incognito mode in Google's Chrome internet browser, you can find out if you have a claim in only a few clicks by visiting www.forthepeople.com/LC Google. It only takes a few minutes to sign up and find out if you have a claim. I thought this was interesting because, you're the officer. You have to make sure who you're talking to, right? So the officer wrote in the filing that she could tell it was Coney that she was talking to. So she asked him about his wife, right? And he said that she was sitting right beside him. So the detective then asked Coney and Brinley to send a photo of themselves, holding up a piece of paper with something specific on it. The couple sends back a photo, which includes Brinley topless, something the officer hadn't even asked for. That I thought was, other than the fact that that's pretty disturbing that you're sending this to what you think is a minor, you're also, you have this detective confirming it's these two people that she's talking to, or this detective's talking to.
Once again, this detective did a fantastic job. That's the core of this case. You got to know who you're talking to. And this guy made it easy for him. And certainly it was almost an issue of reverse grooming. I think the suspect thought he was grooming the detective, but in fact, the detective was grooming him to get him to give up that information. He finally did. And then the case was made.
I also saw reporting that they might have had phone calls with this undercover agent, and you can hear their voices, which, if that's the case, that becomes really hard to argue against, right?
Yeah, the case on the photograph, all this evidence is basically direct. Doesn't appear to be much circumstantial here, which basically shows that it's going to go, if it was to go to a jury, it's going to be an open and shut case. And that's based upon this detective had great training. He knew what he was doing, and he knew the elements of the crime, and he made sure he was very strategic about getting each element met so he could ensure that this case was done quickly, quietly, and with efficiency.
Yeah, it gets worse, though. So Coney reportedly told this undercover agent, this officer, that he had what he called taboo fantasies and said that he and his wife were looking for a prepubescent. And that same day, November 29th, Coney asked to meet up with this girl, again, this undercover agent. So he and his wife, they allegedly drive 200 miles from Conway, Arkansas to Bentonville, Arkansas. They were immediately arrested. First, the idea that they would travel that far to do this. And I mean, you mentioned before that they're so consumed with the desires. That is really next level.
Yeah, that is the next level. So I used to help out on this years ago when this kind of behavior and law enforcement just started getting involved in the online undercovers, and we called them travelers. And then when the travelers showed up, every time they had a bag in the back, and we referred to that as the rape kit, because that's what their objective was to harm that they're in and go there. So once again, I'm sure there was a gigantic team of cops there. And when he showed up, they took care of business. And it appears by the article, he did have a rape kit in his backseat of his car.
Now, according to documents, again, that were filed in court, during the search of their vehicle, they find law enforcement 2 sexual aids, lube, and the receipt for the lube. Now, that's something that just makes your skin crawl. What does that tell you?
That he just proved all the elements right there with intent. He had knowledge of the crime, and that showed his intent. So this was two very sick people who were predators, and thank the Lord that the law enforcement was able to take them off the street.
Okay, now let's talk about the fact that they interviewed them. So they were taken separately, not together, separately to the Benton County Sheriff's Office, and they're interviewed. And according to the court records, Brinley and the wife reportedly said that she was just trying to be a good wife and that she wasn't interested in children. She said she went along with what Coney said and repeated stuff that she heard him say. She said she was not going to do anything with any children, and she just wanted to make him happy. Now, the affidavit says that he told the detective, Coney, that he could talk a big game on the phone, but he didn't think he would actually do anything in real life. He also reportedly told law enforcement that his wife would not do this without him, but that she also wouldn't tell him no. So it kind of seems, I don't know if it's fair to say they're putting the blame on one another, but they're almost, I don't know, excusing their role in it. I was hard for me to make sense of it. What do you make of that?
Well, that's it's more about what the questions that were asked. And there's a classic confession or interrogation technique is you give the bad guy, bad girl in this case, an opportunity at rationalization, because really the elements don't care why you did it. I mean, in this case, all the elements were met, especially with them traveling. They showed extreme intent as well as what was in the backseat of that car. Yeah. So in terms of what they said in the interrogation, they were trying to rationalize. And that's basically the detectives gave them out, so to speak, so they would admit to the crime. But based upon the fact that this was a corroborated confession, they had all this exterior evidence. It really didn't matter their reasoning on why they did it. The fact is they admitted to doing it.
Seemed pretty open with what they did, right? I mean, apparently when the detective spoke with Coney, he told police that they could find child sexual abuse material on his devices. Openly told them that. That seems strange, because that also seems like more charges.
Yeah, and he's looking at federal time too, potentially, because which is mandatory minimums as far as the federal government, 15 to life, depending on how much is on his device. And if he's got videos, he's going to end up spending both of them a very long time in prison. But it sounds like he was trying to rationalize, well, it was just videos, or I was just downloading stuff. I didn't want to actually harm anybody. But once again, that the evidence or the images that are on his computer may actually cause him to get more time if in case the FBI or HSI decides to take over this investigation.
It's crazy to think about if they actually came in contact with a real minor. What could have happened? Disturbing to think about. They're both obviously arrested, charged. They're in the Benton County Jail on $250,000 bond each. I want to go back to the fact that he was the head coach for for the Arkansas Punishers football team. Up until Friday, they fired him. According to their website, the Arkansas Punishers are a minor league football team competing in the Next Level Football Alliance, and the roster includes many former high school and college athletes from across the Southeast United States. Is it impossible for them to have known this is who they hired?
Well, I mean, you kind of have to look back at maybe what happened at Penn State. I mean, was there signs? Most likely. But if you're not looking for the signs, they might have missed them. And in this case, they would likely go back and they're going to interview a lot of those players and former players to see if he had done anything of any kind of issue so they can identify any potential other victims.
Oh, that's so interesting. So that you think that his role on that team is also going to factor into this case?
Well, I don't know, other than the fact that he was around young men,
right?
And he was saying all these really, really crazy things, and he's involved. It sounds like he's involved in child pornography, at least downloading it. Part of their investigation will be likely to talk to some of these players to say, okay, was there anything else going on that we need to know about? Because the number one goal of this investigation is obviously to get them off the street, but the secondary goal is to identify any other victims, not only to give them justice, but also to give services they need so they can recover from this.
My gosh, how many kinds of operations are there really going every day trying to weed out these predators? I mean, how extensive are these operations and how successful? Because I can imagine that like I said, there's sometimes people, they're really talking to the real minors. They're not talking to undercover agents. How difficult is it for law enforcement to conduct these operations every day?
Well, it's just a drop in the bucket of what he did. There was so much of this going on because of the freedom on the internet. Fortunately, every single sheriff's department in the United States has some form of these operations going on, and there's cops everywhere trying to do their best to combat this behavior. But it's, like I said, it's an ocean of deviancy out there, and this is just fortunately they were able to get one or two bad people off the street.
Colin Schmitt, thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it. Coming on, talking to us about it. Always like having you on Sidebar.
Thank you for having me on. I do appreciate it.
And that is all we have for you here on Sidebar, everybody. As always, thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.